Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. I have been a summer camp director for more than 30 years and have worked with thousands of campers, young adult counselors, and parents. I'm also raising 5 kids of my own who are currently ages 14 to 24. So about half of them are already young adults. Here on the podcast and on my website, I share stories, tips, and ideas to help parents and anyone else who works with young people raise competent, kind, self-reliant, optimistic kids. Summer camp, parenting, and happiness are my main gigs here at Sunshine Parenting. So if you're interested in any or all of those topics, you've come to the right place. Welcome. So back in episode 21, I interviewed my daughter Charlotte about her college process, about her application process, and her decision to transfer after her freshman year. The name of that podcast, which was episode 21, was Advice for the College Application and Selection Process. Well, a couple weeks ago, I got an email from one of my listeners, Kim, who said that she has a high schooler going off to college in a couple years and that she really enjoyed hearing from Charlotte about her freshman year experience at college. And she wanted a follow-up on how she's doing now after transferring to Boulder. And so I ended up actually interviewing both Charlotte and her friend Hannah, who has a similar story, who also decided to transfer to Boulder during her sophomore year. So this is our follow-up interview about college application and transfer. And I thought this was good timing because I know a lot of kids are making their college decisions soon. So enjoy this episode of the podcast with Hannah and Charlotte. All right, so today on the podcast, I'm really excited to be talking to 2 of my favorite people, Hannah and Charlotte. They are both sophomores in college, and they have had an interesting journey to the beginning of their college years. And so this is a follow-up to an interview I did with Charlotte a couple months ago about her transfer to Boulder, and we've recruited her friend Hannah to also share her story. So why don't we start? Hannah, why don't you introduce yourself first and just tell a little bit about where you're from and your story?
Sure. Hi. So I am from Santa Barbara, California, and I pretty much ended up in Boulder from kind of a random path, but I'm so excited to be here because my passion is really just being outside and exploring and adventuring and meeting people. And it's such a great community out here. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, cool. I'll ask some more questions about that. Charlotte, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Charlotte. I'm from Clovis, California. So I chose to go to Emory because I wanted to run, but it's kind of a random school in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's far from home. I didn't really like the whole college process, and I just wanted to get it over with, and I thought I'd be a good fit there. And I ended up transferring to Boulder this past semester and just found that I fit a lot better here, and I like it a lot more.
Okay, so I just want to ask both of you, because I think part of the thing that a lot of, parents are struggling with is, what questions could people have asked you back in high school to help you maybe find a better match the first time around when you were looking at colleges?
Well, I think college counselors try and get at, but they go from a weird approach, is just like what makes you happy, which I learned last year when I was at Georgetown, which is where I transferred from, I learned there what made me happy and what doesn't, which I think is hard to know when you're applying for colleges, but just really focusing on that and like what kind of community or what kind of area or what you need around you or the people you would need around you to make you happy, which I think the college counselors or when you're applying to college, you don't really focus on that as much as the name of the school or the statistics of the school or the rankings and stuff like that, which is important in some sense, but I don't know. It didn't end up being as important for me.
Right. Which is kind of funny. I kind of, your story is quite unique because Georgetown is one of those schools that's really super duper hard to get into. And so obviously you had these great statistics and, whatever your test scores and grades and everything. And yet you now have found that you're happier at a place that maybe on paper isn't as prestigious. Would that be true?
Right. Yeah. And it was kind of the pressure of going to that school just because I got in and it was a good school. So, but obviously wasn't the right decision.
Right. Don't you think a little bit? I mean, I think it's a little hard to ask a 17 or 18-year-old to figure out what makes them happy. That's a lot to ask of people in high school to even know what you really do like when you haven't tried much yet. What do you guys think? Like, is it possible? What are the ways that if you were advising your, younger sister or brother who's 17, how would you guide them to try to make a really good decision about where to go?
Well, I think that, I don't know, I just think focusing on what you what I was wanting to do in my free time was be outdoors, be with my friends, making connections with my friends, making connections with my community, whatever that might look like. But I think that's really what was my favorite aspects of my life, I guess, at that time as a 17, 18-year-old. And then I didn't really follow any of that when looking at schools. Like, I was just like, oh, okay, well, I think I'm interested maybe in this program, so maybe this school would fit because they have good academics, and kind of pushed everything else to the side, even though I knew in the back of my mind maybe that I should have focused on the other aspects of life that make me happier.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are worried about wanting to be successful in the future, and especially coming from our high school, there's definitely a pressure to, a lot of people have really successful parents and they want to live up to that. So they'll choose a career path that they think looks good on paper, just like the schools they might choose, like being a doctor. Obviously a lot of people do want to be a doctor, but doing things like going to law school or things like that, where it's just very clear and you just start the path and you do that just so they have a plan, kind of.
Yeah, I'm listening to this audiobook right now called iGen, and it's really interesting. It's talking about how your generation is really feeling pressure to make a lot of money because of school debt, in college. And so there's very much this thing that your job is not necessarily going to be something that is going to bring you a bunch of joy and happiness. And it kind of has to be a thing that makes money, which is interesting because I think it's sort of the flip. I feel like if you're doing something you really enjoy and you feel like you have purpose, you end up being successful regardless of what it is. But I don't think that's how people think right now, just because there's so much pressure. And then once you go to one of these schools that is really expensive, then it's also hard because then you feel like, oh, what do I, how do you decide what to major in or something? Well, so what do you guys think now that you're in Boulder and you're in this setting that's more outdoorsy and kind of fits you more, like the culture of it and everything? How are you finding it different in any way? Like are the classes fairly similar than everywhere, or what's different about being in a different environment, like going to the mountains versus being in a city?
As far as the academic environment or just the culture?
Just everything. How does it feel different there? What is different to you about being there versus where you were before?
Well, first thing that came to mind just academically is one thing at Georgetown that was interesting for me was I was in these classes that I didn't really feel connected to the people around me or my professors or anything, even though it's supposed to be this smaller school and you're supposed to really have this great academic opportunity to know your teachers or whatever. But I didn't find that it was really easy to do that, or that was a natural thing. And it's kind of similar here, but I almost feel like it's more of a community. And I don't know if that's just because everyone is more willing to help, I feel like, or not just in it for themselves, but in it for the greater good, pretty much, which it was a lot of competition at Georgetown, whereas here is I feel like it's the
opposite.
Yeah, it's like a communal thing that everyone wants everyone to excel, rather than kind of beating down those who can't excel and only like weeding out the weak, I guess, till you have the top students.
I also feel like people here are just a lot happier because of that environment, like the academic environment probably, and being in the mountains, obviously, in like a super beautiful place. But everybody just seems a lot happier and everyone seems a lot friendlier. And there's just a sense of like, I don't know, like school community. Like if you go here, everybody has like such strong school spirit and like a connection with each other, even if you don't necessarily like know them, which I like a lot.
So, I mean, I know you guys' experience is limited. You've only been at 2 colleges each, but do you think there's any correlation between schools that are, you know, the statistics make it really hard to get into? Do you think there's a difference in the culture there among the students and that feeling that pressure if a school only admits 5% of applicants or something? Do you think the kids who end up there just tend to be, you know, a little bit more competitive? Do you think that's a thing, or what do you guys think?
Yeah. I think definitely, because I don't know, I felt that people had this chip on their shoulder, kind of, that they got into this school, and so they kind of had this perspective on life and academics, and even like in connections like with other people, that they were almost on this higher level or better than others because of it, which I don't think is necessarily true, and like obviously is not very welcoming or warm to express that with the people around you or the community or the school you're in. So I think so.
So there might be some relationship. So when kids are looking at schools, and maybe if they do have the opportunity to maybe go to, you know, they have several choices and they're trying to decide, perhaps that whole like how hard it was to get into, even though it's hard to take that off the table, maybe that shouldn't be the biggest criteria when they're picking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Easier said than done, though, you know.
Hey, I hear you. I struggled a little bit myself back in my my college days. And it's interesting because I do think, especially with some schools, just, you know, parents, it's so exciting to be one of the lucky few who get in that you start thinking like, oh, I better go there if I got in. And so it is a hard thing, but I guess that's where we have to get off this path of always looking at the statistics and instead focus more on kind of well-being and fit and just sort of that culture thing. Do you, when you walk around that place and meet the people, do you feel like, hey, these could be my people?
Right. And just even walking, so I never like toured here before coming, but even just walking around, I think it would be obvious that everyone is happy here and loves the campus or loves the school, loves the area, loves the people around them. So I think it is obvious, at least here, that everyone is very happy with where they are.
So what other advice do you have for kids who are making their big decision in the next week or so about where they're going to go? What are other things that you've learned or ideas that you think would be worth sharing? You both took a little time off. Do you want to talk at all about that and if that benefited you at all?
Yeah, taking a gap semester was definitely a good move, and I wish I would have done it during the right time period, because I did it this past semester after my freshman year. But I think it was really good just to step away from school and kind of reevaluate like what was important to me and what I wanted to do with my life, I guess. But mostly just take a break from school, and because that's all we've done basically our whole lives, and before throwing yourself into college again after going to high school for 4 years, just to like travel or experience something new or get a job that you might be interested in for the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Hannah, tell about what you did you took a little bit of time away, at least. I guess it was still school, but what did you do during that break between Georgetown and when you started at Boulder?
Right. So I decided that I was going to leave Georgetown a little too late to apply to anywhere else for transferring. So I was kind of feeling like I was floating, but my super loving, supportive mom suggested that I just study abroad in between because I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to if I was transferring later. So I went to Valencia, Spain, and studied abroad there through a U.S. program, and just did it for the semester. But it was nice to just take a step back and just have time to think through things after leaving a school abruptly, kind of, and figuring out where I wanted to go next. And I agree with Charlotte that I think it would be a good idea to take a gap, whatever time period it might be, year, semester, at some point, wherever it fits into someone's life. But I also met a lot of people and seeing the other cultures that I think definitely influenced where I'm wanting to go with my life now, my life path now. Just because it's a different lifestyle over there, and kind of seeing how happy they are and how their culture and daily life is set up so differently from ours. It was kind of a 180 from Georgetown lifestyle to a more day by day, slower lifestyle, I'd say. So yeah, I think just seeing other cultures, and if that's an opportunity that someone has, or just taking time to think about what you're really wanting to do, is really helpful.
Yeah, I didn't want to take a gap year originally because I still kind of feel this, but not at all to the same extent. I just wanted to get it over with, just to get, I guess, college over with and just figure it out. And I didn't want to put myself back another year, behind everyone else. But yeah, what you were saying about slowing down and day-to-day life, but also just slowing down in life in general and enjoying every part of it instead of just trying to rush from one phase to the next to get it over with.
Yeah, I think that's a lot American culture, and especially I know we parents do that to you guys too. We're all in this very frenetic, oh my gosh, we got to get this, and then we have to do the next thing and the next thing, and it's hello, life is kind of what's happening right now. So what are we doing? And stepping back sometimes and just figuring it out is really helpful. And I think especially for you guys who went to a really tough high school, so you were working really hard. I don't think you had a lot of time to just reflect and sit back and just be okay, so, what did I enjoy most this week? It's not like you were SAT prep class, sports, next activity, homework. And so I really think that I do think the whole gap idea, especially if you can do just anything that gets you out of your current place, like a different country or a different job or whatever it might be, because that will help you. And I don't want college to be for either of you just a thing to get through. You want to sort of enjoy it as you're going. So why don't you tell me, what are some of the things that you're enjoying about being in this different setting, more outdoorsy? How are you guys taking advantage of that?
For me, I felt pretty claustrophobic at Georgetown. So just being in this open environment where, I don't know, Charlotte and I go on hikes or trail runs most mornings, and just taking advantage of the beautiful outdoors that surround us. And even though we're still adjusting to transferring, finding friends and everything, it's still, we get to fill our time with exploring the new town and all the mountains that we have access to. So yeah, just, I don't know, just getting to explore new stuff is exciting.
Yeah. Being outside has been a huge thing I love about Boulder, but also definitely just everyone we've met has been super nice, and I just feel like there's so many more people to meet and it's just never ending. So I kind of like that about a big school versus where I felt like I knew a lot of the people at my old school. I don't know. I know a lot of people like going to small schools where they know everybody around, but I feel like it's been kind of cool to like not recognize most people, but then occasionally see someone, because it's just like the possibility of like so many people to meet. I like.
So at a bigger school, I mean, I think people often think that it's like either big or small. What are ways that if you do end up at a really big school like Boulder, or all the public universities are pretty big, what are ways that you can kind of make it smaller or find your community? Do you feel like there's lots of different opportunities there to make it smaller for yourselves?
I think one way is meeting people in your class. So every time you go to class, you kind of have buddies there and you can talk with them and hang out with them, ask about homework. And then it's also just more faces to see around campus of people you know. So I think that's a really good way to meet people and friends.
Yeah, and then one community that we've kind of
infiltrated.
Yeah, is the ski and snowboard club. So any kind of club, which I'm still looking to join more, maybe just for more opportunities to meet people. But it has become this little microcosm, or whatever you want to call it, of this bigger campus, because it's, like Charlotte was saying, like one girl in one of my classes now knows all the ski and snowboard club members. So it kind of just becomes this little connected group that you get to meet people with and do fun stuff with and go skiing with on the weekends, and seeing them around campus, and they'll always be willing to introduce you to more members. So yeah, I think clubs are always a great way to do it, especially in bigger campuses, because I found in my smaller campus that the clubs were pretty exclusive and not really as welcoming, or maybe not as great of a social scene as far as meeting a bunch of people or whatever. So I think in the bigger schools, yeah, clubs are important.
Or you can just transfer with a pal.
Yeah.
Like us.
That's always a good thing. Well, I was thinking as you guys were talking, I think it's funny because whether it's school or a job or anything, really you have to kind of get outside your comfort zone and meet people regardless of where you are. And whether it's a small school, even if you're at a really small school, you still need to find community and find friends. So it might feel more daunting at a bigger place, but I wonder if it's really that different, really, when you think about it.
If we had come here as freshmen, I know a lot of people even here at this big school meet people in their dorm, and I definitely met a lot of people in my dorm. So I think that makes a huge difference wherever you go, big or small school, just like your dorm or your hallway or just the people there. I feel like that's a good place to start for people.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder to transfer to when you transfer to meet people, but we're working on it.
Well, and that's interesting because I think both of you, I mean, you can speak to this, but so transferring is kind of hard because you did miss out on that whole freshman kind of, we're all new together, being in the dorm and everything. But even with transferring, you're still, how are you both feeling about this move? Hannah, why don't you go first, and then Charlotte, you can end us with just sort of the summation of, was this a good move? You know, are you here for good? Or are you transferring it again somewhere else?
I know we joke about that. Just why not try all new places? But no, I am so happy here. Definitely staying, and just excited about more possibilities of meeting more people and getting more involved in groups that we're already in and whatnot. But what was your last question?
Just you're happy, like, are you happy about the change overall? Is it, are you glad, even your whole trajectory, are you glad how it all turned out?
Yeah. Yeah. And even so, kind of coming in as a transfer, it's nice not being the freshman that's scared and kind of overthinking every move. But just kind of knowing that you're okay with yourself, and now that you're in the right place is comforting in itself. And so I feel like it's almost easier and a nicer way to get accustomed to a new place. So yeah, I definitely am happy, and glad that I made the decision to leave the last school. I think that's some something that people hesitate to do because it is a big decision or hard to do. But I learned what I don't like or like what doesn't make me happy, and I learned what makes me happy, and following what makes you happy, I think I've ended up in a better place. So yeah,
she's in a better place. Yes, I'm also super happy I'm here at Boulder. I'm kind of glad. I'm still happy I went to Emory because of the friends I made, and just coming here, I can appreciate it a lot more. And like she said, I like not being a freshman. Like, it was fun at Emory, and now it's fun to be here and know kind of what other colleges are like, I guess, and how it compares, and just how much of a better fit this is for me. And yes, I'm going to stay, not planning on transferring. And I'm really excited for the next couple of years here, because I think it'll only get better and better.
Okay, so then this is just another thing that came to mind. I think a lot of parents, so a lot of kids, as you probably know, are unhappy their freshman year, especially their first semester. It's a very common thing for kids to not feel happy because it's hard. It's a really hard adjustment for kids. So for parents who have maybe a child who's a freshman, a young adult, what would you advise them about what are the criteria to either encourage their child to transfer or stick it out? Like, what are some of the things that you would think of? Because I think of both of you, you're both independent people. It's not really, neither of you were homesick or any of that really. It was just it was more about the fit. So what do you think about that? Because I know you have friends who maybe wanted to transfer whose parents weren't really supportive of that. And you also have friends like each other whose parents were like, hey, we want you to be happy. Do what you need to do. So if you were advising parents who are talking to their kids about these issues, what would you tell them about helping their kids with those decisions?
I think it is important to stick it out for a full year, because I really wasn't sure until the end of the first year that it wasn't what I was looking for, or that I could have been happier somewhere else. So just really giving it time to feel it out, I think, is important. And then also I found great relief in knowing I had other options. So once I figured out that I had another option to go study abroad and then transfer, I felt great relief and was able to see even more that it wasn't the right place or the right fit. So I think just giving the option as a parent, like giving the option of just applying to other places, will help alleviate some of that stress of, should I stay? Like, is this the right spot for me? And then with that other option or prospect, it's easier to see, okay, maybe I don't want to leave. Like, that doesn't feel right for me, or it doesn't feel right here. I should leave. And now I have these other options. So
I think it's important, if someone wants to transfer, they should think about, like, if they really like put in any effort in the current school they're at, like if it's really the school that's making them unhappy. And then if it is the case, like, then yes, of course, considering transferring, they should definitely look into it or apply to places. But in my case, I wasn't really too unhappy at Emory. I just knew I could be way happier somewhere else. So yeah, I just kind of applied to Boulder as a second option, and I wasn't really considering it. And then once I got in, I was kind of thinking about how much better my life could be and how much more I would like it.
That's actually really good. So one of the options for parents, I think that's good, saying, wait, you know what, finish this whole year, because the first semester is probably the hardest for anyone anyway. So that's hard to judge a whole school based on your first experience there when you don't know people yet. That's probably smart. And then also even just the way you both did it, where you just take some time, even if you just stop out for a semester, like maybe sophomore year, and just try something else, go to a different school or do something abroad or do a job, to get a little perspective. Say, oh, you know, I'm a little bit further away from it, so maybe I can decide better from afar if I really do. And I love, Hannah, the way you described that how you felt about your decision. That's what I always know, is that when I'm not sure about something, if I kind of make a decision or see another option and I'm like, whoa, that's so cool, going to Spain, you all of a sudden realize, wow, I'm so excited about this other thing. Maybe that's telling me something, that it is time for a change or something. So just kind of listening a little more to, you know, how you're really feeling about all this stuff. But I think this is really helpful, because I do think some parents, and especially, you know, I mean, Hannah, you're pretty fortunate that your mom was so flexible about leaving Georgetown. I mean, Georgetown, you know, parents like telling people that their kids at Georgetown. Your mom's not a bumper sticker type anyway, but do you know what I mean? I mean, parents get a lot of, like, they really spend a lot of effort trying to get their kids into a good college. So that's a big deal, I think, for parents to be able to realize.
Well, I feel like if you hadn't been like, yeah, go to Boulder, like, sounds fun, then I probably, if you guys were encouraging me to stay at Emory, I probably would have done that. I wouldn't have tried to, like, convince you or anything. So I feel like parents supporting, like, makes a huge difference. Well, financially and in other ways, like, you encouraging me to, like, do it definitely helped.
I did, though, advise you not to go right away. I just said, why don't you take a semester and do something else? Because I didn't want it to be this thing where you were just moving from one thing to another without really taking a little bit of time to think through it. So I did at least encourage you to do your interim gap semester thing. So that was good. And then the other thing I just want to remind you of, do you remember what I told you when you were in high school about college? What my one piece of advice was, which this is not, no college counselor would ever tell you this. What did I tell you?
Go with your friends.
Yeah. And look at you guys now.
No.
Do you notice?
I'm paying attention.
Well, it sounds kind of silly, but there are so many colleges, and it takes a long time to get to be good friends with someone. You invest a lot of time and energy into getting good friends. And so if you go to a place and don't have any friends to start with, you're starting from scratch. But if you have one good buddy or good pal that you go with, you're starting already with kind of ahead of, you know, that whole community thing. You get to start.
Right.
Yes. But that can also, like, discourage you from trying to make new friends. You always have to fall back on.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like some kids
like,
go to,
be social if Hannah's down the hall.
Right. Well, I think it's a mix. It's the same thing at camp. A lot of parents will say they want their kid to have a buddy at camp, and it's only if it's the right kind of buddy, the kind of buddy that will encourage you to make new friends. You'll introduce each other to friends. It's not the clingy buddy that doesn't let you kind of expand your social horizon. So I guess that is kind of sketchy. You got to pick the right friend if you're going to go to college with them, right?
But it is nice, like, we can go to stuff together and maneuver the new environment here together and figure it out. So it is nice to have someone you already are best friends with going in.
Well, that's so fun. You'll have to send me some of your photos of you guys on hikes and stuff so I can put it with our podcast, because this has been really fun. And I hope that people listening, whether it's parents who are, you know, trying to guide their kids or kids who are trying to make college decisions, just learn from what you have experienced, that it's not the end of the world if where you start isn't, you know, doesn't end up being the best match. And you can keep looking around, and you can even take a break. And in the end, these years are going to go by pretty fast, and you guys are going to laugh at how much you thought you had to, like, hurry and get done with it, because there's a whole lot of life after college to be, you know, dealing with.
Yeah. And even just figuring out the college process was so stressful and all encompassing and everything. But now looking back, it's like,
it didn't have to be.
Yeah, it didn't have to be.
Sad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm proud of both of you for where you are, and good luck with your finals coming up. And take some more hikes and enjoy your beautiful surroundings. And we'll catch up with you again, maybe the junior year roundup for the podcast.
See you then.
I really enjoyed chatting with Hannah and Charlotte for this episode of the podcast. You can find notes and links to things we discussed at my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 34. I do have a favor to ask. If you are a regular listener and you're enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you'd take a few minutes to give a rating and review over at iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps other listeners who are like-minded find podcasts that they like. So I'd appreciate your rating and review. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Dr. Tim Jordan from his article, Does It Matter Where You Go to College? Going to a prestigious college doesn't make you successful. You must do that for yourself. It's not where you go to college that matters. It's how you go to college.